The kitchen was filled with the soft rhythm of small sounds, the knife against the board, the low simmer of something left unattended on the stove, the clinking of glass on marble. It was a quiet evening, the kind where silence carried more weight than words. She moved with habitual grace, her hands busy, her mind elsewhere. The door opened with a creak, and his voice slipped into the room. Ethan carried himself casually, as if nothing mattered too much, but the way his questions always landed suggested something else. He leaned against the counter, his presence unannounced but not unwelcome. "You ever notice how people stop trying after a while?" he asked suddenly, almost like a passing thought. Maya glanced at him without lifting her head fully, only a quick flick of her eyes. "Trying what?" "Trying to actually see each other. Care. I mean, you can live under the same roof, share the same meals, and still feel like you're alone." His tone was calm, but there was a current underneath it, testing, deliberate. She gave a faint laugh, more a shield than amusement. "That's just life, Ethan. People get comfortable." He didn't let it go. Comfortable. Or careless. He picked up an apple from the counter, rolling it in his hand before setting it back down. "When does comfort turn into neglect? Isn't there a line?" Her fingers paused over the knife, only for a heartbeat. The smallest hesitation, then back to chopping, pretending not to notice how the question had found its place in her. "You think too much," she said softly, though her voice lacked firmness. He smiled faintly, not arrogant but curious, leaning in as though each word might reveal something hidden. "Maybe. Or maybe I notice what most people choose to ignore." His eyes followed her movements. "You deserve someone who notices." That remark sat between them like a whisper neither wanted to acknowledge. She placed the knife down, wiped her hands carefully on a cloth. "You shouldn't say things like that," she muttered, keeping her back turned. "Why not? It's just the truth." His voice lowered, less playful now, more measured. "You've been quiet lately." He doesn't ask why. Her shoulders tensed. Daniel had been gone most nights, the phone calls short, distracted, his attention elsewhere. She never complained, never pressed, but silence carried its own story. Ethan's words scraped against something fragile inside her. "It's not your concern," she whispered, steady but not sharp. "Maybe not," he agreed easily, though the ease was deceptive. "But I see it anyway. And I wonder," he trailed off, deliberate in the pause, then added almost lazily, "have you ever thought about someone else?" The words landed like a match struck in the dark. She turned slightly, enough for her profile to be seen but not her full expression. Her lips parted, closed again, searching for a response that wouldn't betray what stirred inside. "That's an inappropriate question," she said finally, her tone clipped, but not as severe as it should have been. He tilted his head, smirking faintly but without mockery. "I didn't ask if you did. I asked if you thought about it." Her silence was its own confession, though she quickly reached for another task, opening the fridge, shifting jars, moving just to fill the moment. She forced composure into her voice. "You're young. Curiosity is natural, but don't play with words you don't understand." "I understand more than you think," he countered smoothly. "I see how people look at each other when they feel unseen. I've watched enough to know the signs." She closed the fridge softly, the cool air dissipating, her hand lingering on the handle. The kitchen felt smaller, heavier. She wanted to dismiss him, to end the conversation, but the echo of his question wouldn't release her. He took a step back, easing the tension but not removing it. "Forget I asked," he said lightly, though the look in his eyes told her he didn't mean it. "I just think people deserve to be noticed, that's all." She forced a smile, polite and strained. "You should focus on your own life. Leave the rest alone." But when he finally left, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall, the kitchen returned to its quiet rhythm. The simmer, the faint tick of the clock, the lingering weight of his words. She stood still, staring at the untouched counter, the question circling in her head like a shadow. "Have you ever thought about someone else?" The knife lay where she'd placed it, a line between before and after. She picked it up again, but her hands were slower now, distracted. The sounds of the kitchen returned, but the silence inside her deepened. She told herself it was nothing, just a careless remark from a restless young man. She told herself to forget. But the truth lingered in the air like a secret waiting for its time. Word count 770. Do you want me to continue straight into section 2? 760 words, in the same style, or pause here so you can review this one first. The days that followed carried an emptiness I could not disguise. Every interaction with Ayan became a performance. Every word I spoke to him weighed down by truths I had no desire to hear repeated. He carried himself as though nothing had been exposed, as though my silence was a form of acceptance. But silence does not mean forgiveness, it is a prison, and I was already suffocating inside it. The people around us continued to smile, congratulating us on our union, admiring what they thought was a perfect beginning. If only they knew that behind the polished surface lay a crumbling foundation, held together only by my refusal to collapse in front of them. I started to question myself as much as I questioned him. Was I weak for staying, or strong for enduring? Each time I look at Ayan, I remembered Zara's tears, his confession, Saad's reluctant honesty. Each memory built a wall between us, brick by brick, until I could hardly reach him anymore. And yet, despite the devastation, I could not make a clean decision. Marriage is not just two people, it is families, expectations, and the fear of judgment. Walking away meant more than leaving him, it meant inviting whispers, disgrace, and a future I wasn't prepared to face alone. But what gnawed at me most was not just the betrayal itself, it was the casual way he carried it. He didn't beg me to stay, he didn't drown in guilt. His apology, when it came, was shallow, an acknowledgement without depth, like a man who knew he had already won because my silence ensured his comfort. That realization was more painful than the infidelity itself. To know that he had calculated my tolerance, trusted that I would stay quiet for the sake of appearances, it broke me in ways betrayal alone could not. I began to notice more lies, subtle ones, woven into daily life. Excuses about late returns, sudden meetings that stretched into the night, glances at his phone that lingered longer than necessary. He thought I wasn't watching, but I saw everything now. Once your eyes are open to deceit, you can never return to blindness. And so I watched, collecting fragments of his falsehoods, building a truth he would never speak aloud. Zara disappeared from my life without words. She stopped visiting, stopped calling, retreating into a silence that confirmed her guilt. But her absence was no comfort. Every memory of her lingered in my home, in photographs, in objects she had helped me choose. She had been stitched into the fabric of my life so deeply that pulling her out left holes everywhere. I realized then that betrayal does not simply remove a person, it reshapes everything they touch. I could no longer trust my own judgment of people, could no longer look at friendships without suspicion. The cruelest part was that I still loved him. Or at least, I loved the version of him I thought I had married. That love clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go, even as truth tore it apart. I wanted to hate him fully, to free myself from the weight of his presence. But love is not a switch. It lingers even where it is unwelcome, and that was my curse. To feel love for the very man who had destroyed me, nights became the hardest. The bed that was supposed to hold intimacy now held distance. I lay awake while he slept, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how he could rest so easily while my chest carried storms. I began to write in secret, pouring my pain into words I could not speak. Pages filled with questions, accusations, broken thoughts. I wrote because it was the only way to keep from shattering completely. As weeks passed, I realized the choice before me wasn't about him at all, it was about me. I could stay, pretending, living beneath the weight of lies, allowing my identity to dissolve into silence. Or I could choose myself, even if it meant walking into uncertainty, even if it meant facing the world alone. The betrayal had already destroyed the marriage. The only question was whether I would allow it to destroy me. 2.1 evening, as the house grew quiet, I stood in front of the mirror still wearing the jewelry from the wedding. I studied my reflection, the woman who looked back at me almost unrecognizable. She was no longer the bride filled with hope, no longer the friend who trusted blindly, no longer the woman who believed love was enough. She was something harder now, something sharper. Betrayal had carved her into someone new. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I had already lost him, but I had not yet lost myself. That clarity was my turning point. I didn't need to announce it, didn't need to scream it out loud. My decision settled quietly inside me like a seed waiting to grow. I would not let his lies define my life. I would not carry Zara's betrayal as my identity. I would step away, not because I wanted freedom, but because I deserved it. He could keep his secrets, his masks, his comfort built on deception. I would keep my dignity, and so, without fanfare, I began to plan my departure. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with resolve. Because sometimes the loudest act of strength is not in fighting for something broken, but in walking away from it. This is section 4, almost equals 770 words, carrying the story into Maya's emotional resolution and decision. Do you want me to now craft the final YouTube-style title and description for this full faceless video series? The night was still, the house quiet enough that every small sound seemed to carry further than it should. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of wood under her steps, the soft clatter of a plate she set too firmly on the counter. She told herself she was only keeping busy, only passing the time until sleep would rescue her from the thoughts she didn't want to face. But when his voice came from the doorway, low and steady, the walls she had built around herself cracked again. That night, Ethan said, his tone deliberate, "When I asked if you ever thought about someone else, did you?" Her back stiffened instantly, her hand freezing around the glass she held. She didn't turn right away, her silence more telling than any spoken answer. When she finally moved, it was slow, her voice measured but trembling underneath. "Why are you asking me this again?" "Because I need to know," he replied without hesitation. His footsteps moved closer, not rushed, but steady, like he had already decided what he would say and nothing could stop it. "I can't keep pretending it didn't mean anything." "You didn't answer then." "I want your answer now." She set the glass down, the sound of it soft but sharp in the quiet. "You shouldn't push me like this. You don't understand the weight of what you're asking." "I do," he said simply, his eyes fixed on her though she avoided his gaze. "I see it every time you look away. I feel it every time you let silence do the talking for you. You think that's nothing. It isn't. It's everything." Her chest tightened, the truth pressing against her ribs. "You're crossing a line that can't be uncrossed." He didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time to admit that the line was already blurred long before this moment." His voice dropped lower, steadier. "You don't have to lie to me. You're lonely. He's never here. And I'm standing right in front of you, wanting you in a way he hasn't in years." Her breath caught, and for the first time, she let her eyes meet his. The weight of what she saw there unraveled something inside her, a raw hunger not hidden, not ashamed, just present. She whispered, "You're dangerous." "Maybe," he answered softly, "but I see you." Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. "You think this makes it right?" that wanting something forbidden makes it less wrong. No, he admitted, shaking his head. It makes it real. And maybe wrong is the only way it was ever going to feel this alive. The words wrapped around her, tearing through the fragile excuses she had clung to. She wanted to tell him to leave, to put distance between them, but her lips stayed still, her silence betraying her. The space between them seemed to collapse, not with touch but with the intensity of everything left unsaid. When his hand reached out, he didn't take hers at first. He let his fingers hover close, so close that she could feel the heat, a breath away from crossing the final boundary. She should have pulled back. She didn't, her voice was barely audible. This can't happen. His hand closed the space, his fingers brushing against hers, the contact electric, undeniable. It already is, he whispered. She closed her eyes, not in surrender but in recognition. Every warning in her mind screamed to pull away, to put an end to it, yet her body betrayed her, her grip tightening around his hand instead of releasing it. For a long time, they stood there in silence, nothing but the sound of their breathing filling the kitchen. Words felt too small for the enormity of what had shifted between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy, almost breaking. Do you realize what this means? If anyone knew, no one will know, he interrupted quickly. This is just between us. That's not how secrets work, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. They grow. They consume. They ruin. Then let it ruin me, he said, without hesitation. Because not saying it, not reaching for it, already feels worse. Her breath shuddered, the battle between reason and desire tearing at her. She had told herself countless times that she was stronger than this, that temptation could be shut away. But his hand in hers, the heat of it, the certainty in his voice, it shattered the careful walls she had built. She whispered, almost to herself, one question in this kitchen changed everything. And one answer will change the rest, he said back. The moment hung, fragile and dangerous, their hands entwined, their silence louder than words. She knew that whatever followed, there would be no going back. Infidelity wasn't about passion alone, it was about the moment you chose desire over loyalty, when you let yourself be seen by the wrong person and didn't turn away. When he finally leaned closer, it wasn't the touch that shook her, it was the realization that she didn't stop him. She let the closeness happen, let the forbidden truth become real. The glass on the counter remained untouched, the food on the stove forgotten, and in that stillness the boundary dissolved completely. Later, when she stood alone again, the echo of it all pressed against her chest, heavier than anything she had carried before. She whispered to the empty room, nothing will ever be the same. And she knew it was true, not because of what had happened, but because of the moment she had let it happen. Word count 764. Would you like me to now create the title plus description for this full 3-section faceless story, in the same style as you asked for your earlier projects? Morning light crept into the house, pale and quiet, but the silence was heavier than before. Maya moved carefully through the kitchen, her hands going through the motions of setting things in order, yet every sound, the scrape of a chair, the clink of porcelain, felt amplified by the memory of what had already been done. She tried to convince herself that routine could erase the mark of last night, but the truth lingered in every corner of the room. Ethan entered without hesitation, his presence no longer the casual intrusion it once was. There was a steadiness in his step, a certainty that came from crossing the line they had both sworn not to cross. His voice carried no regret. You haven't said a word since. She turned sharply, her eyes narrowing though her voice betrayed exhaustion. What do you want me to say? That it didn't happen. That we can go back to pretending. I don't want you to pretend, he replied, calm, unwavering. I want you to admit that you wanted it as much as I did. Her throat tightened, the words caught there, unspoken but undeniable. She busied herself with the dishes, scrubbing harder than necessary, as if the motion could erase guilt. It was a mistake. He stepped closer, his tone firm but not loud. Then why didn't you stop me? Her hand froze mid-scrub, water running over her skin, soaking into her sleeve. She didn't answer immediately, because the truth was unbearable. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost breaking. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. But that doesn't make it right. It makes it real, he countered. It makes it ours. She shut off the water abruptly, the silence between them sharpened by the click of the tap. No, Ethan. It makes it dangerous. It makes it impossible. But he didn't retreat. You keep calling it impossible, but it already happened. You can't erase it, no matter how hard you try. You let me in. Her breath shuddered as she leaned against the counter, her strength faltering. Do you understand what would happen if anyone found out? If he found out? I don't care about him, Ethan said quickly, almost fiercely. He doesn't see you. He doesn't give you what you need. I do. That should be enough. It isn't about enough, she snapped suddenly, the force of her voice startling even herself. This is about loyalty, about betrayal, about destroying everything that holds this house together. You think it's only about us, but it isn't. It never will be. He fell silent, but the silence was not surrender. His eyes still burned with the same conviction, the same desire. You can call it betrayal, he said finally, his tone quieter but no less intense, but what we shared wasn't a lie. Lies are what happen when you tell yourself you're happy when you're not. Her heart pounded, torn between the ache of truth and the weight of guilt. She whispered, almost pleading, we have to stop this before it destroys us both. And if stopping is what destroys us, he asked, his voice softer now, a trace of desperation breaking through. If going back to silence is worse than the risk. She turned away, unable to face him. Her hands pressed against the counter, gripping so tightly her knuckles whitened. She thought of Daniel, of the years spent waiting for affection that never returned, of empty nights and hollow mornings. Then she thought of Ethan's hand in hers, the way he had said I see you, and the contrast was unbearable. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know how to live with what we've done. You live with it by admitting it's the truth, he replied instantly. You live with it by not pretending anymore. The air between them felt suffocating, thick with everything they had said and everything they had done. She finally turned, her face pale but her eyes burning with something she could no longer hide. If we continue, there's no going back. There already isn't, he answered without hesitation, her lips parted, 1,000 words on the edge, but none spoken. The silence was louder than anything, pressing in until it became unbearable. At last, she whispered, then God help us both. Ethan reached for her again, slower this time, deliberate. She didn't pull away. She should have, but she didn't. The quiet of the house bore witness as their choice solidified, not in one reckless act but in the acceptance of what they had already become. When the moment broke, when he finally left the kitchen, Maya stood alone once more, her reflection faint in the window. She didn't recognize herself anymore, not the woman who had lived in shadows of neglect, nor the woman who had once believed loyalty alone could sustain a marriage. She was someone else now, defined by a choice that could never be undone. The sound of the clock ticked steadily, each second a reminder of the path she had taken. She whispered into the emptiness, one night, one truth, and nothing will ever be the same again. And she knew, with a clarity sharper than guilt, that it was true. Word count 762. Would you like me to now craft the final title plus description for this 4-section story, optimized for a faceless infidelity style short story video?